Dawn crept over the cedar eaves as the bell tolled, and the courtyard held its breath. The narrator watched Evan Brooks step forward, his gaze fixed on the flag that snapped in the wind. Master Thomas Hale said, "Evan has lost his path." The words struck like a gong, and the sparrows burst from the pines. Evan said, "Master, I did as taught, yet the silence gnaws." Master Thomas Hale said, "You clutch the silence like a blade, and then wonder why you bleed." Maya Chen shifted, unsure whether to speak. Clara Reeves stood at the gate, curiosity hiding a quiet ache. Jonah Park closed his eyes, weathered calm gathering like rain. The bell faded, and the wind answered for everyone. Master Thomas Hale said, "Today you will see what you refuse to release." The courtyard emptied to a hush that felt heavier than crowds. The narrator followed Evan to the cloister walk, where light striped the stones. Evan said, "If I am lost, what have I been carrying?" Maya Chen said, "A mirror that cuts when gripped." Master Thomas Hale paused by the bell rope, and let the quiet teach first. Clara Reeves watched from the threshold, unsure whether to enter a life she had only photographed. Jonah Park said, "A cup too full cannot taste rain." Evan said, "Then pour me out before I drown." The wind slipped through the cedar slats, and dust danced like small suns. Somewhere a kettle cried, thin and honest. Master Thomas Hale said, "We begin by setting down the sound you chase." In the tea house, steam curled from cups like shy spirits. The narrator traced the silence that gathered between breaths. Master Thomas Hale said, "Hear the kettle without naming it." Evan set his cup down too hard, and the liquid quivered. Maya Chen said, "When you stop measuring, warmth arrives by itself." Clara Reeves said, "How do you work without a goal?" Master Thomas Hale said, "The path walks when the walker rests." Jonah Park smiled at the floorboards that knew many storms. Evan said, "My fear is the emptiness below the noise." Master Thomas Hale said, "Sit within it until it sings." The kettle whistled again, and no one moved. The narrator watched the master place a small stone on Evan's palm. Master Thomas Hale said, "Carry this to the river without carrying it." Evan blinked at the riddle that tasted of river silt. Maya Chen said, "Let the water name the weight." Clara Reeves recorded nothing, as if a camera would bruise the moment. Jonah Park said, "A fish never drowns." Evan said, "If I fail, the shrine will know." Master Thomas Hale said, "Failure is a name, not a wall." The bell in the distance marked a time that none of them followed. Evan closed his hand around the stone and opened his eyes. Evening drew long lines across the tatami, and the narrator felt the day exhale. Evan sat alone with the stone resting on a folded cloth. He said, "I keep turning toward the noise that praises me." The paper walls heard and kept the secret. A memory pressed at the door like rain. Maya Chen had left a candle, steady and small. Master Thomas Hale had left no words, only space. Jonah Park's steps faded to the rhythm of crickets. Evan said, "If I let go, who stays?" The wind answered by lifting the corner of the cloth as the night settled. Evan rose before dawn, restless, his chest tight with questions. The narrator watched him cross the misted courtyard as if every step dragged a hidden chain. Evan said, "Meditation only echoes my failures." Master Thomas Hale stood under the cedar, silent as stone, eyes calm. Maya Chen said, "Silence does not betray you, it reflects you." Clara Reeves lingered with her notebook, capturing fragments of words but not their weight. Jonah Park whispered, "The heart must break to feel the wind." Evan said, "I have broken, yet I feel nothing but emptiness." The bell in the distance carried the chill of iron. Master Thomas Hale said, "Emptiness is not the absence of truth, but the doorway to it." The narrator felt the morning thicken, a threshold that demanded surrender. The narrator followed Evan into the meditation hall, where incense traced the air like fragile rivers. Evan's knees pressed into the mat, trembling. Evan said, "Stillness is suffocation." Master Thomas Hale said, Stillness is not the absence of breath but its true shape. Maya Chen sat nearby, eyes closed yet her lips whispered encouragement. Clara Reeves raised her camera but lowered it again, the moment too raw. Jonah Park said, "When you sit within silence, storms reveal their center." Evan said, "The storm is endless." Master Thomas Hale said, "Only the clinging makes it so." The walls echoed the kettle's faint hiss. The narrator felt the weight of Evan's doubt against the hush of the hall. The narrator observed the riverbank where Evan sat with stone in hand. The current surged, and the sky glared with midday heat. Evan said, "The stone is too heavy." Maya Chen said, "The weight is not in the stone but in your refusal." Clara Reeves stood on the bridge, torn between skepticism and awe. Jonah Park said, "A leaf surrenders and is carried." Evan hurled the stone and watched ripples devour it. Evan said, "Now I am empty-handed, yet still burdened." Master Thomas Hale said, "Because you cling to the act of letting go." The river swallowed the sound, leaving only silence. The narrator felt the air sharpen, like a blade turning inward. In the garden, cicadas screamed, their song filling the spaces where words failed. Evan knelt before a row of lanterns, face shadowed. Evan said, "I cannot escape myself." Master Thomas Hale said, "You cannot escape what you never possessed." Maya Chen touched the lantern, flame wavering. Clara Reeves wrote quickly, her pen scratching urgency. Jonah Park said, "The shadow follows, yet it is not the walker." Evan whispered, "Then who am I without the noise?" Master Thomas Hale said, "The question is the gate." The narrator felt the lantern light press against the dusk, fragile yet unyielding. Night deepened as Evan sat alone before the shrine. The narrator traced the candlelight across his weary eyes. Evan said, "If surrender is peace, why does it burn?" The wind pressed against the shutters. Maya Chen left a bowl of rice at his side, quiet offering. Master Thomas Hale lingered in the shadows, saying nothing. Clara Reeves sat across, camera idle in her lap, breath shallow. Jonah Park said, "Peace is not the absence of pain, it is the embrace of it." Evan whispered, "Then let it consume me." The candle flame bowed and rose, steady against the night. The narrator described the hall where silence roared louder than drums. Evan knelt before Master Thomas Hale, sweat marking his robe, though the air was cold. Evan said, "I fail the meditation, I fail myself." Master Thomas Hale said, "You do not fail, you only resist." Maya Chen whispered, "The mirror never lies, but you refuse to see." Clara Reeves leaned against a pillar, her notes scattered like fallen leaves. Jonah Park said, "The river does not curse the stone it carries." Evan said, "I am a stone that never moved." Master Thomas Hale said, "Then let the river move you." The candlelight flickered, and shadows stretched as if eavesdropping. The narrator felt the weight of expectation press against Evan's shoulders like an unseen chain. The courtyard shimmered under relentless noon sun. Evan carried buckets of water up the steps, each step a battle. Evan said, "The wait is endless." Master Thomas Hale watched from the shade, unmoving. Maya Chen said, "You fight the task instead of walking with it." Clara Reeves muttered, "Why worship suffering?" Jonah Park said, "Effort reveals the walls of pride." Evan dropped the buckets, water spilling across the stones. He said, "I am broken already." Master Thomas Hale said, "You must break before you can be whole." The narrator felt the words carved deeper than the sun's heat. The spilled water shone like scattered mirrors. The narrator traced Evan's breath as he sat beneath the cedar tree. His chest heaved, anger replacing stillness. Evan said, "Why must I break for truth?" Master Thomas Hale said, "Because the cup must be empty to taste the tea." Maya Chen reached out but stopped, sensing the storm within him. Clara Reeves scribbled furiously, her skepticism sharpened. Jonah Park said, "The storm reveals the strength of the tree." Evan said, "The storm reveals only my weakness." The wind hissed through the branches, scattering dry needles. Master Thomas Hale said, "Weakness is the mask of strength you have not yet seen." The narrator felt the cedar roots hold steady as Evan trembled. The training yard glowed with torches as night fell. Evan was ordered to rake gravel until the moon rose high. His arms moved, but his mind boiled. Evan said, "This labor blinds me to truth." Master Thomas Hale said, "Truth is in the labor you reject." Maya Chen said, "The lines you draw reveal the lines within." Clara Reeves took photos, the shutter breaking the hush. Jonah Park said, "Every pattern dissolves when rain falls, yet still the pattern matters." Evan said, "Then why do I feel only rage?" Master Thomas Hale said, "Because you grip the rake tighter than the path." The narrator felt the gravel whisper beneath the wooden rake. The narrator followed Evan to the shrine steps, where the night wind howled through lanterns. Evan dropped the rake, falling to his knees. Evan said, "I am nothing, and still I fight." Maya Chen knelt beside him saying, "Even nothing holds space." Clara Reeves whispered, "Is surrender defeat?" Jonah Park said, "Surrender is the only victory that heals." Master Thomas Hale said, "You clutch the fire and curse its burn." Evan said, "Then take it from me." Master Thomas Hale said, "Only you can open your hand." The lantern flames bowed low, as if listening. The narrator felt the night tighten, demanding release. The narrator followed Evan as he returned to the meditation hall at dawn. Light poured through the shoji screens, revealing dust motes like drifting constellations. Evan said, "I chased peace as if it were prey, yet it evades me." Master Thomas Hale said, "Peace is not prey. It is the hunter." Maya Chen whispered, "The trap you set is for yourself." Clara Reeves sketched quickly, hand trembling, her doubt unraveling. Jonah Park said, "The river never demands the stone move, yet the stone shifts in time." Evan bowed his head, whispering, "Perhaps I was never lost, only grasping too hard." The silence did not resist, it embraced. The narrator described the garden, where dew clung to each leaf like fragile pearls. Evan walked slowly, carrying nothing, yet shoulders lighter. Evan said, "I see I was burdened not by the stone but by my pride." Master Thomas Hale said, "Pride is a mask worn until it smothers." Maya Chen said, "When you set it down, the air becomes clear." Clara Reeves lowered her pen, her eyes no longer hardened. Jonah Park said, "The garden blooms without asking who watches." Evan whispered, "The garden was always here waiting for me." The wind stirred blossoms into the air as if applauding. The narrator stood with Evan at the riverbank where stones glistened under midday sun. Evan said, "The stone was never heavy, only my clinging made it so." Master Thomas Hale said, "Clinging turns feather into boulder." Maya Chen said, "The river teaches without a voice." Clara Reeves lifted her camera, capturing stillness instead of struggle. Jonah Park said, "The water accepts what it cannot hold." Evan touched the water, letting it pass through his fingers. He said, "I was always free, I just refused to believe it." The river answered with endless motion, calm yet unstoppable. The narrator described the temple hall filled with lantern glow as twilight settled. Evan sat in the center, his face calm for the first time. Evan said, "I see the truth was never hidden, only covered by my fear." Master Thomas Hale said, "Fear is a veil of your own weaving." Maya Chen said, "When the veil lifts, the same sky shines." Clara Reeves dropped her pen, realization dawning in her silence. Jonah Park said, "The lantern does not fear the night, it simply shines." Evan exhaled deeply, his breath steady, his eyes clear. The hall seemed wider, boundless. The narrator traced the mountain path under the silver moonlight. Evan walked ahead, no burden in his hands, no storm in his face. Evan said, "What I sought outside was always inside." Master Thomas Hale followed with measured steps, serene as the mountain. Maya Chen said, "Now you walk with the path, not against it." Clara Reeves whispered, Perhaps I too was searching. Jonah Park said, "The mountain never moves, yet it teaches movement." Evan smiled faintly, saying, "I am not broken. I am whole." The wind carried his words, dissolving into the night. The mountain stood eternal, echoing peace. The narrator entered the shrine chamber, where silence pressed like stone. Evan knelt, trembling, his hands open on his knees. Evan said, "I cannot hold it any longer." Master Thomas Hale said, "Then stop holding." Maya Chen whispered, "Let the silence carry you." Clara Reeves leaned against the wall, her eyes shimmering with questions. Jonah Park said, "A flame burns brightest when the wax surrenders." Evan struck the floor with his fist, crying, "I'm undone." Master Thomas Hale said, in being undone, "You are finally free." The candlelight flared as if to echo truth. The narrator felt the moment rupture into release. The narrator followed Evan into the courtyard where storm clouds churned overhead. Evan's breath broke as he shouted to the sky. Evan said, "Take from me what I cannot bear." Thunder rolled like an answer. Maya Chen said, "The storm outside mirrors the storm within." Clara Reeves held her notebook close, rain spotting its pages. Jonah Park said, "The sky is vast enough to hold your grief." Master Thomas Hale said, "Let go, and the sky will release you." Evan dropped to his knees in the rain, tears indistinguishable from the storm. The narrator felt both fury and surrender in the downpour. The narrator described the meditation hall filled with night's stormy echoes. Evan collapsed, face pressed to the floor. Evan said, "I surrender, nothing is mine." Master Thomas Hale said, "At last you open your hand." Maya Chen placed a candle before him, flame steady. Clara Reeves whispered, "Is this the awakening you spoke of?" Jonah Park said, "Awakening is not a spark, but the silence after thunder." Evan exhaled, and the tremor left his body. The candle's flame grew taller, casting soft halos. The narrator felt peace seep into every crack once filled with despair. The narrator saw Evan sit upright again, no longer bound by weight. His eyes shone wet but calm. Evan said, "I thought surrender meant loss, yet I have gained peace." Master Thomas Hale said, "You have gained nothing, only uncovered what was always yours." Maya Chen said, "The stillness in you is stronger than storms." Clara Reeves lowered her pen, whispering, "Perhaps this truth belongs to all." Jonah Park said, "Peace flows when resistance ends." Evan smiled faintly, breath steady, hands unclenched. The lantern light wrapped around him gently. The narrator felt a shift, awakening alive in the stillness. The narrator followed Evan to the temple gate, where morning light stretched across the horizon. Evan stood straight, unburdened, his hands empty but steady. Evan said, "I am no longer bound to what I chase." Master Thomas Hale said, "Now you walk with truth, not after." Maya Chen said, "Peace has found you where you stand." Clara Reeves whispered, "Perhaps I too am ready to let go." Jonah Park said, "The dawn carries what the night surrenders." Evan looked to the sky and breathed deeply. The narrator felt the world widen as Evan's surrender became awakening. The narrator watched the morning spill across the mountain as Evan walked through the garden. His steps no longer dragged but flowed. Evan said, "The air tastes different now." Master Thomas Hale said, "The air has never changed, only you." Maya Chen smiled, saying, "The stillness is alive in your breath." Clara Reeves closed her notebook, whispering, "I never thought peace could be this visible." Jonah Park said, "Peace is not seen but felt, yet it reveals itself when you stop chasing." Evan bent to touch a flower, not to own it but to feel its softness. The narrator felt the mountain breathe with him. The narrator followed Evan to the river, where the water glittered like silver threads. Evan sat at the edge, his reflection no longer distorted. Evan said, "I see myself as I am, not as I feared." Master Thomas Hale said, "The river never lied, only your eyes clouded it." Maya Chen said, "Your calm ripples outward, touching us all." Clara Reeves lowered her camera, whispering, perhaps I am ready to see without framing. Jonah Park said, "The river holds no judgment, it simply carries." Evan let the water run across his palms, smiling. The narrator felt the river mirror his clarity. The narrator described the tea house filled with warmth as steam curled upward. Evan poured tea with steady hands. Evan said, "Even this simple act feels whole." Master Thomas Hale said, "Wholeness lies in the unbroken present." Maya Chen said, "Every pore carries your stillness." Clara Reeves smiled faintly, whispering, "Perhaps my search was for something this simple." Jonah Park said, "Tea teaches patience without words." Evan raised the cup to his lips, tasting clarity instead of doubt. The narrator felt the tea house glow with quiet joy. The narrator followed Evan to the training yard, where gravel rake patterns glowed in twilight. Evan moved the rake with ease, no fury left in his arms. Evan said, "Each line feels like breath itself." Master Thomas Hale said, "What was once burden now reveals truth." Maya Chen said, "The garden reflects the calm you hold." Clara Reeves sketched quickly, her stroke softer than before. Jonah Park said, "Patterns vanish, yet they teach forever." Evan said, "I do not need permanence, only presence." The wind carried away the sound of the rake, leaving stillness behind. The narrator stood at the mountain overlook where dusk bled into stars. Evan breathed deeply, eyes on the horizon. Evan said, "The path no longer pulls me, I walk with it." Master Thomas Hale said, "The journey ends when you stop searching." Maya Chen said, "You shine as the sky shines, without effort." Clara Reeves whispered, "Perhaps truth was never hidden, only ignored." Jonah Park said, "The mountain does not move, yet you have climbed within." Evan closed his eyes, smiling, his breath steady as night settled. The narrator felt peace ripple through the darkening sky. The narrator described dawn returning with gentleness, washing the temple roofs in pale gold. Evan stood in the courtyard, hands loose at his sides. Evan said, "I am here, not lost, not searching." Master Thomas Hale said, "At last you see without reaching." Maya Chen said, "Your breath is steady as the morning wind." Clara Reeves lowered her pen, whispering, "I feel the quiet too." Jonah Park said, "Peace is not earned, it is revealed when nothing is held." The sparrows scattered above, and Evan bowed, smiling faintly. The narrator felt the silence bloom into acceptance. The narrator followed Evan to the river, where mist curled like breath. Evan crouched, letting water run over his open palms. Evan said, "I hold nothing, yet I feel whole." Master Thomas Hale said, "The river reflects what you already carry." Maya Chen said, "The stillness moves through you now." Clara Reeves whispered, "The search outside ends when the inside opens." Jonah Park said, "Water teaches the lesson of yielding." Evan closed his eyes, smiling at the current's song. The narrator felt the river carry peace beyond sight. The narrator entered the tea house where steam curled slowly into the beams. Evan poured tea into 5 cups, hands steady. Evan said, "This act is enough." Master Thomas Hale said, "Enoughness is the root of peace." Maya Chen said, "The tea tastes brighter today." Clara Reeves whispered, "I will carry this stillness home." Jonah Park said, "Every sip is a lesson in being." They drank together, no words needed. The kettle hissed softly, steady as breath. The narrator felt the room glowing with quiet unity. The narrator described the garden where lanterns swayed gently in the twilight. Evan raked gravel with calm precision, no struggle in his motion. Evan said, "Each line is a breath." Master Thomas Hale said, "You see now, the rake is not a burden." Maya Chen said, "The patterns live in your heart." Clara Reeves whispered, "Even impermanence feels beautiful." Jonah Park said, "The garden teaches presence, not permanence." The cicadas sang, and Evan smiled, setting the rake aside. The narrator felt the garden hold its breath, alive with peace. The narrator followed Evan to the mountain overlook where the horizon bled into stars. Evan stood silent, watching the world stretch endless. Evan whispered, "I am not lost. I am here." Master Thomas Hale said nothing, his silence enough. Maya Chen bowed her head, smiling. Clara Reeves pressed her notebook closed, no words left to write. Jonah Park said, "The mountain holds you now as you hold yourself." The night air shimmered with stillness. The narrator felt the final truth. Peace was never distant, only waiting.